This is gonna be an exercise for you guys. Put yourself in this woman's shoes and tell me at the end if you would have done the same as her. What I can definitely tell you is that a marriage without communication is doomed to fail. You can ask Jeannie that. She thought she found the perfect man to spend her life with, but stuff happened. Again, you will be the judge. Jeannie met Stephen Trantel at a party. They immediately hit it off because their personalities matched perfectly. Stephen worked on Wall Street and Jeannie was working in sales. They were the couple everybody wanted to be. 3 years later, they got married in a beautiful ceremony. I think from the series, this is the first marriage that started with love and ended the same way. They bought a house in Jeannie's hometown and had 2 kids. Jeannie quit her job to be a stay-at-home mom while Steve will be the only breadwinner in the house. It's unknown if the couple talked about that from the beginning, but Steve strikes me as a traditional guy who wants to provide for his family no matter how.
Stephen was an incredible dad. He was very, very involved with the children right away.
I don't doubt that. Again, this family was cemented by love. But love without trust and a solid line of communication can still lead to an awful path. Steve's job seemed to be quite unpredictable. 1 week they will be broke, with no money for mortgage, food, nothing. And then the next week they will be paying all the bills, going on trips, living the life. That seems pretty unstable, especially having 2 young boys in the mix. And the couple will have horrible fights because money just wasn't enough. The whole family went to New York City to see the Thanksgiving Day parade. It was supposed to be a lovely mini vacation for the kids and a getaway from all the money issues.
We're driving into Manhattan, and he's driving like a lunatic. He was so cold and so mean, I didn't even know who he was. And the kids heard that night.
It's always horrible to know the kids got involved in adult problems. That moment and everything they heard will linger for the rest of their lives. Steve was anxious because there was no money. I believe Jeannie knew this. I mean, she got a call a few days back from the mortgage company telling them they were way behind payment, so she knew how bad things were at the house. Okay, so this next part will be a segue. Let's say that in another part of the town, events will end up colliding with Jeannie's reality. And you know why pretty fast. Detective Skopek had a huge problem. He was trying to catch one of the most slippery bank robbers he had encountered. With one hat, a pair of shades, and a glove, this robber would terrorize banks all over town. They were dealing with a professional. But even pros make mistakes, and this notorious bank robber made a big one. His tactic was to act like a regular customer and then deliver a note instructing the bank teller to put all the money in the bank. Then he will leave the bank, dump the disguise in a garbage bin, and act as if nothing happened. But the last time he wrote a note in a spiral notebook. This is when Detective Skopek thought about something.
When you go to a spiral notebook, are you going to put on your gloves and then rip that page out of the spiral notebook?
So there's probably a fingerprint somewhere on that piece of paper, and gosh darn it, there was one. Going back to Jeannie's personal nightmare, we left off on the Thanksgiving Day parade disaster. When they went back home, Stephen was already in his normal self, maybe because he needed to cool himself off, and apparently yelling at his wife did the trick. Plus, that day he was going to go fishing with one of Jeannie's uncles. Steve loves fishing. That's probably the only thing that brings him peace.
Stephen left with Jeannie's Uncle Rod. They planned to return just after lunch. At noon, Stephen called to say he was almost home, but by 1:30, he still hadn't arrived.
Jeannie called her uncle to see if he was there, and yeah, he was there, surprised that Stephen was not home yet. Hours passed and nothing from Steve. Jeannie decided to call the hospitals in the area and ask to see if there was any car crash victims with Steve's description, but nothing. They had a wake to attend and Jeannie was left to go all by herself. Her husband is missing and she's on a wake. That is some bad juju there. 9 hours of agony, and then the phone rang.
He said, we have Stephen in custody for robbing fleet banks all over Long Island.
Jeannie, of course, was in a shock, but hey, at least he's alive. She didn't believe anything because according to what she saw, Steve had a job on Wall Street and his work hours would be the evidence he needed to be exonerated.
I would say, Steve, you have records of you working like on the floor. He would always be blank when I would say that.
The bank tellers pointed to Steve being the man who had robbed their banks. All of them. He robbed 10 banks. And Jeannie's dad, a retired prosecutor, told her to drop it. He's guilty. He knew.
I had people that used to work with him that said he's been missing for months. No one knew where he was.
So what happened to Steve to turn into a bank robber? A prolific one, let's give him that. Well, he did have a job on Wall Street, but lost it because he made a risky decision that made him lose a ton of money.
He did it. He ran out of money. He didn't know where to go. He was in fear. He was stuck. We were losing our house, and he thought to himself, one day, I have to rob a bank.
Not only that, but he taught himself how to properly do that with recurring trips to the library. He will find books that will teach him what to do. I have no clue what books this man was reading, but damn, he did a great job.
I'm sure there were so many people in this town that thought, how did she know? But I did not know. I did not know.
And that is the problem. There was not only a lack of communication, but also a lack of empathy. Steve will be tearing his hair off because of money troubles, and Jeannie will do nothing to help. She had her family to probably take care of the kids while she is looking for a job, but that idea wasn't appearing in her head. Like I said before, you need more than love to make a marriage go smoothly. Communication and trust are one of the most important pillars in a relationship. And this marriage had nothing. Steve didn't trust his wife with the fact he was laid off, and Jeannie could care less about seeing him stressed about money.
Stephen wanted his life to be perfect. He wanted his boys to have everything. He did want me to have everything. I have to say he did.
Another bad character trait. The traditional man whose dream is to have a good job to provide for his family. There's nothing wrong with that, by the way. But sometimes life gives you a kick in the balls, and your job as a spouse and a parent is to keep your family informed and not lying to them. Steve was sentenced to 9 years in prison. He got out in 2012. I think he is a manager at an Applebee's, but don't believe me on that one. Jeannie divorced him right after he was in prison.
Jeannie went from being someone who was always taken care of. Now, she was the person who was taking care of the boys. So that was a dramatic 360 for her.
Good on her. But in my opinion, all of this was preventable. This is when I ask you, would you have done what she did? I'm not even gonna ask you about Stephen's decision. I believe it's unanimous. He's an idiot. He didn't think about his family while robbing those banks. He was thinking about keeping appearances. He wanted to be the guy with the money and the lovely family. He is dumb for sure. But if Jeannie had snapped out of her entitlement, she would have noticed those outbursts. That phone call telling her they own a bunch of money on mortgage. There were a lot of signs she dismissed. Both suck, in my opinion. He sucks more though. He ruined his life and changed his family's dynamic forever. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Please don't forget to subscribe and like the video. It really helps. Here is a very famous story of a creepy man who got involved with a teenager who ended up shooting his wife. Thank you for watching.
I didn't believe it. But I did not know.
Oh, really, dude?